Very good. All over the world, consumers are asking for, demanding raw milk. That's because the internet makes us all neighbors. And when you hear about raw milk being available to somebody living, let's say, in California or Arizona or Pennsylvania, you want it too. So Canadians are no different. They want their raw milk, and they find incredible value in it when they do find it. So it's a matter of talking to the dairymen and establishing the correct standards. Let me go forward. Let me get this straight here. Make sure I know how to do it. I'm going to talk with two hats today. First few minutes, I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of a normalized raw milk market here in California, where raw milk is legal. It's always been legal, but very strict and tight standards. We operate Raw Farm, which used to be called Organic Pastures Dairy. We changed our name 3 years ago. We can talk about a little bit more about that later. But we recognized early on that raw milk would thrive if it was safe. So we really have kind of gotten away from the idea that this is all about freedom to consume food, although that's important. But we recognized early on that we would have all the freedom we wanted if raw milk was safe, because there'd be nothing to pick on us. There'd be nothing to accuse us of. There'd be no ill people. There would only be happy people that were drinking delicious raw milk if the milk was safe. So we've let safety be our leading chant, our leading whole thing. The standards are all related to raw milk safety, and that's taken to a fantastic place now after 24 years of producing raw milk. So the product we have here on the right-hand side of the screen, that's our raw milk. It's a top seller in hundreds of stores in California. We test all of our products for pathogens every day. That's not something that's required to the Raw Milk Institute, but it's something we do here because the liability and the markets are so great. We wouldn't want to have any kind of an error there. But it's just a very interesting thing to see in California, having raw milk thriving as much as it is. There's all of our products we produce: butter, cream, cheese, milk, kefir. We also have a pet food brand, which is Raw Farm, which is allowed to be sold across state lines. In the United States, raw milk is restricted to the state it's produced in, but we have a permit from the FDA to have exactly the same product, the kefir especially, being sold across the United States under a pet food label, which is exactly the same product with a different label. And it's now selling in all the Sprout stores across the United States. So we do dairy different. We do not use the same standards as raw milk being produced that's being produced for pasteurization. We have a different standard. That standard is for people, not for the pasteurizer. An example of what we're doing here in California at Raw Farm are $21 million in sales, projected to be $24 million by the end of this year. We had 44% growth last year. The year before that, we had about the same amount of growth. It's just an incredible amount of growth, especially since COVID. It's just grown like crazy. 600 stores in California, 1,700 stores nationally, including the pet food products. Top selling fluid milk, on top of way far above the pasteurized fluid milks in the core markets. We're producing 42,000 gallons of raw milk per week from 950 cows on our 500-acre operation here near Kerman, California. We have 65 employees and 22 delivery trucks. This is a family-owned, 24-year-old operation that is thriving. And this is an example of a thriving market, thriving production in a place where raw milk is normalized. This could also happen in Canada as well. So I wanted to just kind of give you an idea of what it could be looking like if you're thriving in California. We believe the essentials to the raw milk success is that raw milk will only thrive if it's safe. It's not so much a freedom issue, it's a safety and human illness issue. Safety equals thriving success. When your milk is safe and nobody's getting sick, everybody's healthy and happy, your raw milk will thrive. So that's a really important thing to distinguish, because many years ago, there was a big battle between, it's all about freedom. We should have the freedom. We should have the freedom. We should have the freedom. And they ignored the safety side. And when that was happening, it was kind of a free-for-all. And people were getting sick and nobody take responsibility. It was just a mess. But now we've got the food safety side figured out. Milk is thriving and we have our freedom also. Let's see here. This is an example of the farm to consumer connection, which I think we all love, and I love. But not all farmers actually love it. In fact, we found out that when we reached out to the 89 dairies in the Northeast this last couple of years that lost their contracts with Danone, the organic dairies that lost their contracts with Horizon Danone, very, very few are interested in having the consumer connection. They just wanted to be fairly paid by a processor, and they didn't want to do farm tours or have to bottle their milk or transport it or do anything. They didn't want to deal with the hassle of consumers. I absolutely love the connection to consumers. And this is our big celebration we have every 2 years called Camping with the Cows. And this is actually 600 people that came and literally set themselves on our farm for 2 days. And we celebrated together and enjoyed everything about humanity and had a good old time. That was last year. So it is a wonderful thing to have the farm to consumer connection for me. And if you're going to do raw milk, you need to embrace people. You need to embrace people because you're not selling to a processor, you're selling to people. So if you don't like people, then find somebody on your team that does, because you need to connect to people. That's a really, really important thing. If you don't like people, you don't want to connect to people, raw milk's going to be kind of tough for you. It takes a team. Jobs are created from grass to glass. The next generation finds purpose and value on the farm. They don't want to go away. The next generation, your kids want to stay around because money's being made. Relationships are good and strong. It's really sustainable. A lot of farms find themselves where the next generation is not interested in doing what mom and dad do because there's no money being made, there's no opportunity, and the farm gets sold. This really allows the next generation to thrive. Highly sustainable. Robots and automatic milking machines cannot yet replace the hard work of preparing udders and connecting to people. So it's still a people hard work kind of a thing. Remember that raw milk is the most anti-inflammatory food on earth. And that's driving sales because people are looking to try to decrease inflammation in their bodies because inflammation drives chronic disease. All the legitimate scientists in the world now and the people being taught in medical schools, chronic inflammation drives chronic disease. So raw milk is the first food of life, and it's very powerful in terms of its ability to build the immune system as well as decrease inflammation in the body. Another key point is that influencers on social platforms drive sales. When you've got movie stars and you've got athletes and people driving your products, it's really powerful. Danica Patrick, which is a NASCAR driving, retired NASCAR driver, he's a huge supporter of raw milk. And she has literally 1 million followers. Leanne Rimes, she's a country singer. She really, really loves raw milk. It's helped her with her eczema and her immune system. Tori Spelling, huge supporter with her 4 or 5 kids. Colt McCoy, other NFL players that need raw milk to support their own physique, their own strength, their own bone strength. Big supporters of raw milk. Sylvester Stallone, for 20 years, he's one of our first big supporters, and so many more people. So social networks and platforms of social networks drive raw milk sales more than advertising ever did. Found out many years ago, a big study was done here in California with the California Milk Advisory Board about the Got Milk advertisements. They found that advertising really didn't work very well at all. But if you had an influencer that had 1 million people that followed them, if you influenced them and they believed in you, then the people that followed them would follow you. So influencers really, really drive market share. So that's kind of an important thing to think about in terms of being online and having social platforms. Even Jamie Oliver, the British chef, this is many years ago, back in our previous brand, supported us. Here you can see him flirting with my wife a little bit, having fun down at the Pasadena's Farmers Market. But the foodies, the nutritional people, the people that want good health have always been very supportive of whole raw dairy. Here's an example of a picture of our dairy. This is where we produce our raw milk. This is about 6,500 gallons of milk a day. You can see pretty clean conditions here, well lit. The milk is chilled rapidly down to below 35 degrees Fahrenheit, 3 degrees Celsius within literally 3 minutes of being milked. So very rapid chilling, all kinds of cool stuff going on here in our milk production facilities. This is an example of our clean udder. A really, really critical point here is how you prepare the udder and how you go about assessing the udder and the milk that comes out of the teat to assure that milk is clean. That's just an example of what we're doing there. Another picture of our dairy barn. And there's my son right there, touring a bunch of people that came to visit our farm. We tour a lot of people through the farm to have them connect to us, understand us, and see where their food comes from. kids don't know where their food comes from. They think it comes from the store. Well, to educate them, it actually comes from cows and hardworking farmers is a really important part of that generational farm to consumer connection. There's my grandson, little James there, looking at the cows coming in. Very much. There's more people touring our dairy barn, looking out and looking down at our operations. We actually specifically designed our dairy barn for touring so consumers could see our production. And there's my son with his his daughter walking across the pastures there. So that's enough about us. I just wanted to give a picture of kind of the normalized raw milk production here in California that's thriving and doing so well. Raw Milk Institute, it's already been introduced, but this is the nonprofit hat I'm wearing today. I really want to get into how you could participate in establishing very high standards for raw milk production in Canada. There are already a bunch of farmers up in Canada, especially in British Columbia, Robert the Woods, who have used these standards and done a whole lot of work and actually collected the data and actually have a peer-reviewed article published on PubMed. So Raw Milk Institute is very active in Canada already, and I assume that with all this participation with you guys here today, it'll be more active. But we've established raw milk standards 12 years ago. We've trained thousands of farmers internationally, including Great Britain and New Zealand and Australia, United States, Canada, USA, all over the world. We've done training. We've listed 35 farmers. That's actually certification across the United States and Canada and elsewhere. A lot of farmers have received training and not gone through the certification process, but you can see through the outbreak data and how few illnesses are occurring that this has had a ripple effect, where the farmers have received training who have not become certified actually have made a positive impact in the world in terms of decreasing illness. So becoming certified, we love it. We want it. We think it's fantastic, but it's not necessarily that important in terms of actually having an impact on consumers. But we do encourage people to become listed if they so choose to want to do that. You've heard about me already. I basically, when I go to the International Milk Genomics Consortium conferences, I've done that for the last 12 years. I'm the only farmer in the crowd surrounded by PhD experts in breast milk and raw milk. And it's interesting to see the old pre-med paramedic here sitting around with all these PhDs asking the hard questions that they can't ask themselves. Why can't they? Because the grant money that goes to support their jobs comes from big industry. And if they start asking hard questions about raw milk, they lose their jobs or they lose their grants. So I sit there in the room and ask all the questions on everybody's minds, but they can't ask the questions. So it's pretty cool to have that as far as a relationship with PhDs. We're going to talk about the history of raw milk. We're going to talk about raw milk farmers that are thriving, health benefits of raw milk, the legality of raw milk, the benefits of selling it, the risks and safety, risk management. We're going to talk about testing and building a market. All these things we're going to touch on in the next hour. And then we're going to have a period of time after that where lots of questions can be asked, and I'll be more than happy to respond to them. Raw milk history. It's kind of an interesting thing. Back in the 1800s, a lot of people got sick from raw milk. You think about it, people have been drinking raw milk for 10,000 years or more. And in the 1800s, people were bringing their cows with them. Because remember, everybody had a cow or goat back in the 1700s, 1600s. I mean, everybody had a neighbor with a cow or goat. It was a family necessity because you had food today. You didn't have to wait for it, to hunt for it, fish for it, or grow it. You had food today. If you had grass and sunshine, you had food today. You had butter, cream, cheese, milk. You had kefir. You had beef. And so in the 1800s, people started moving to the city. When they did that, they brought their cows from sunshine and grass and clean water in the countryside into a downtown area, a crowded area. They didn't have grass, didn't have clean water, didn't have flushing toilets, washing hot water, didn't have any way to control the sanitary environment, and didn't have any feed. They would start feeding the cows brewers, distillers grains from the downtown brewery. And as a result, there was a very high incidence of illness and death as a result of drinking this really ugly raw milk in a downtown brewery dairy. And so in 1893, the solution was to either pasteurize it. The early name for pasteurization was called parboiling, or become a certified raw milk dairy. And that all happened in 1893. So you can see the pictures here on the right-hand side, the bottom, that was a dairy in Virginia that actually had 1,000 cows divided up into a bunch of dairies, each one of them 100. and they'd be milked, and that milk was going to the Mayo Clinic to heal people all through until 1970s. And then you see this dairy in the middle here, which was literally a pathetically ugly place that was very disease-ridden and ugly. So that's kind of the history of raw milk. The certified raw milk commissions in 1893 actually lasted until 1999, was used to treat chronic disease, including cardiovascular disease and diabetes. Pasteurization became the norm because anti-raw milk campaigning and subsidizing the raw pasteurized milk. So much easier to have dirty milk collected from 50 different dairies. You didn't have to worry about chilling rapidly or quality or health of cows because you're just going to cook it. You're just going to cook it. You're going to kill it all. And so standards are very loose for pasteurized milk. You don't have to chill it rapidly. You don't have to check for quality in terms of the disease or pathogens. Anything goes, basically. And so now it's done at a very massive scale, and it benefits the processors, not the farmers, and certainly not the consumers. Remember that consumers are rejecting pasteurized milk at 2 to 10% per year of market share loss, depending on which stores you're looking at, because it's very hard to digest. It's the most allergenic food in America, as shown at the FDA website. Most allergenic, more than peanuts or anything else. It's the most allergenic food in America. Where raw milk is very good for allergies, where pasteurized milk is highly allergenic. So it's literally the opposite of pasteurized milk and raw milk. They're polar opposites. So you can kind of see how this is all gone. And politically, the processors carry weight because the farmers don't have any voice. The processors give the farmers very little money for their milk, and the farmers go out of business and they consolidate and get bigger and bigger and bigger. And it just becomes an ugly, consolidated mess where the consumers are ignored. Raw milk farmers are thriving. Those that make safe raw milk are thriving. It's interesting that on our polling of RAWMI listed farmers, it shows that they're thriving. They're out of milk. They need more cows. They need to produce more. I know that Raw Farm, we grew at 44% last year. Fond du Lac, which is another listed farmer we have down in Arizona, grew 100% in 1 year. That's all from SPINS data. SPINS data comes from the barcode readers at the retail, at the cash registers. So this is hard data showing the growth of operations, which is just incredible. Another thing that is interesting is local producers really do thrive in times of tumult or emergency. Back in March of 2020, COVID hit the fan and the stores were all sold out of product. And dairymen were actually dumping their milk in lagoons when we were thriving because of something that was going on where the processors could not change their order of business. They couldn't move their milk to the stores because they just lost all the schools that were shut down. They just lost all the restaurants. And as a result, they couldn't receive the milk and redirect it. Where we delivered the milk directly to stores, they said, leave all the milk you can. And we grew like tremendously during that period where the processors were literally dumping their milk in the lagoons and not being able to deliver stores. We see pasteurized milk brands dropping at 2 to 10% per year now, which is really quite sad. The health benefits of raw milk. Remember that it does three things. A lot of this information comes from the PhD experts that study breast milk. Breast milk, a lot of study is done on breast milk. Remember, breast milk, human breast milk is a mammalian milk, very similar to cow's milk, goat's milk, sheep's milk, camel milk, reindeer milk, very similar. A little bit different here and there, but very much the same in terms of its goal. It nourishes, it protects, and it directs. Those are the three things that raw milk directly from the breast to a baby does. It nourishes the baby whole completely. Doesn't need anything else. Didn't even need water. It completely nourishes the baby. It protects the baby through the bioactive mechanisms that are in raw milk, actually protects it from getting sick, builds an immune system in the gut, and directs this microRNA, mRNA, which actually gives direction to the baby. When the baby is now cut off from the umbilical cord, doesn't get direct direction from the mom from the blood, but it gets direction now from the breast. So it's very interesting how for the first 6 months of life, that raw milk actually directs the health of the baby. And when there's confusion in the baby, what does mom do? Creates the antibodies, does this and that for the baby through this direction process. The gut is the largest immune system organ in the body. And 60% of bioactive components are carried by the butterfat molecule, or the globule, I should say. Well, and guess what? When you have skim milk, there's no fat there. And if you pasteurize it, you don't have any bioactivity left. So, you think about this, the gut and the bioactive components, that's where you get this immune function. So that's where you get the most anti-inflammatory food on earth. And that's a quote from Dr. Bruce German at the IMGC conference in 2022. I saw this in a doctor's office. I was going in to get my annual class 3 medical because I'm a pilot. And so you have to have a medical every year, or every 2 years, I should say. And this was on the wall. And it shows ingredients in breast milk versus formula. And it says processed cow's milk. And which would you choose? All baby need breast milk. Which would you choose? Breast milk. Human milk is alive. Formula is not. It's kind of interesting how this is the bridge, guys. This is a really important political bridge in Canada. Nobody in Canada is going to say babies should not be breastfed. Nobody in Canada is going to say that. The World Health Organization, your health organizations, nobody's going to say mothers should not breastfeed their babies. That's raw milk. You shift that to goat, cow, or sheep, and everybody freaks out. But it's interesting to note that the elements found in breast milk are the same things found in cow's milk. And so that's the bridge of understanding is, hey, are we saying not to breastfeed our babies? So it's that's where the science actually is a bridge of peace between those that condemn raw milk and those that support raw milk. Is a bridge of peace there. And I've used it very effectively to kind of take down that really defensive wall between those that oppose raw milk and those that support raw milk by explaining breast milk. The USDA in our food pyramid talks about breastfeeding. The first thing they talk about is breastfeeding. So there is a consensus on raw milk. It's just human raw milk, not cow's raw milk. And that's the bridge we have to go across. To get deeper into the benefits of raw milk, here is a nice chart showing raw human milk, raw cow's milk, and then pasteurized milk, almond milk, soy milk. And you can see dramatic differences between all of these components, these elements, these enzymes and biodiverse probiotics and good omega-3 fatty acids and lactase-producing bacteria and bioactive vitamins and bioavailability and oligosaccharides. All these things on the left-hand side just go on and on and on. They're all active and vital and appropriately proportioned and all alive in human milk, and exactly the same in cow's milk or goat's milk or sheep's milk. But yet when you look at the pasteurized side, they're destroyed, inhibited, inactivated, gone, not there. It's a mess. And that is why people are choosing raw milk to build their immune systems and nourish their families. Remember that raw milk was created by 1 million years of co-evolutionary generation by generation pressure on mom to optimize the survival of the next generations. You think about it. Baby is born, it's the weakest time in their entire life for the immune system. What do they get? They get colostrum and nursing a mom breast to get raw milk, to build the immune system and support it, to nourish it, to completely protect it, and to direct it. Those three things. Nut milks, milk alternatives don't do anything. They didn't have the generational pressures of 1 million years of evolution. They're 5 years old, 10 years old, built in a lab. And so you remember pasteurization was created by market forces. The failure of pasteurization was literally created by these market forces that people didn't want to drink pasteurized milk anymore because they had so many problems with it. They went to milk alternatives in the last 50, 60 years. And another thing that's interesting is raw milk is soluble both in water and fat phases. One of the only solutions in the world that's like that. Petroleums don't do that. Fats float in water. In raw milk, actually, the fats are both soluble in water and in fat phases. And that's absolutely fascinating. And a lot of the milk scientists look at raw milk and the elements found in raw milk as a drug delivery system because it's such a rare thing found in nature. The studies done on raw milk are mostly done in Europe, and they show that you get easier digestion, improved gut health, stronger immune systems, less fever and respiratory infections, fewer ear infections, less asthma and allergies, and improved lung function and reduced asthma, or eczema, I should say. All of these come out of universities in Europe. You're not going to see these studies done in the United States. There's a couple of them, but it's not going to be there. By the way, the FDA and the regulatory agencies deny all of the science, even though it's been peer-reviewed, journal published, and it's on PubMed, which is the Bible of science for scientists. If it's on PubMed, it's undergone the scrutiny to pass all the tests and standards for being legitimately scientifically founded. or grounded, I should say. So they're basically just denying the truth because this is PubMed published information. And this is why people are saying, I'm not going to believe my regulatory system or my legislative system. I'm going to believe my farmer and the science and go directly to the farmer. And that's what's driving raw milk sales. The deliciousness, flavor is the number one reason why people drink raw milk. And raw milk that's done meticulously well, that has low bacteria count, has the best flavor and also has a very nice long shelf life between 16 and 24 days, depending on which milk, which cow, and how well it's done and how cold it's kept. Raw milk laws, they vary from state to state and country to country. Retail sales in California are legal. They're legal in another 20 states or so. But on-farm sales are in some states have that only. Herd shares, pet milk, complete ban. In Canada, it's completely illegal. Although I'll tell you, I've never been to Canada and not had raw milk. It's available up there. You just have to find it. It's carefully protected. But in Canada, it's interesting that farmers can drink their milk from their own cows. So the laws are kind of funky in Canada about being able to consume your own milk from your own cow. The big thing in Canada is the milk boards that have done so well to protect the farmers on their pasteurized milk see raw milk as a threat. What we need to do is build a system in Canada which incorporates and includes and embraces, and it's part of the additional thing that's supplied from farmer to consumer. And it encourages and helps the farm boards. It's another sustainable product. It's a cottage industry product. There's already laws in Canada for cottage industry. And there's no reason why raw milk could not come under the cottage industry law, protected and be a part of the milk boards. But one thing I don't like to see is where the farmer cannot control their own prices. I would hate for the milk boards to regulate what the prices are for the farmer because they might give a price which is under cost of production. It's got to be above cost of production, and it's got to be a value-added thing where somebody with 10 or 20 cows can actually make a living. It's very important for the farmers to be able to set their own prices. Benefits of selling raw milk. You get a higher price point, living wage for farmers. In Canada, we've seen $20 and $30 a gallon, even higher than that in some areas. But the cost to produce is higher, of course. But it's interesting that in 1969, the Ford truck cost less than $4,000. And the farmer was getting about 90 cents a gallon for their milk on the farm. Today, that Ford truck costs $50,000 to $60,000. And the farmer's getting about $2.20 to $2.30 a gallon. So there's something really wrong with milk pricing in terms of not being able to keep up with what's going on with natural inflation. So farmers are just having a hell of a time making any money with smaller operations. And that's why you see consolidation to huge operations that can be very efficient. But on the raw milk farm, you see us actually making money like you would have if normal inflation was taken into account for that 1969 Ford truck. Selling to people instead of a processor is hugely rewarding. You get to know the families, they're nourished by your milk, and then you get to know you. That's super important. You actually have a family brand where there's trust and understanding and relationship. The guys with the processors don't have that. The pasteurized milk guys don't have that. If they went away, nobody cares because they're not represented by a consumer or a brand, and they're really irrelevant. You become very relevant when you're a raw milk producer because if you go away, consumers don't have raw milk. So it's really an important value-added connection for the farmer to be connected directly to consumers. We've already talked about this a little bit, but here's a good picture showing that what happened. This is March of 2020. The processors were actually literally dropping milk out on the ground because they couldn't receive it. Well, the raw milk farmers were selling raw milk like crazy because we were able to adapt and be resilient to changing market conditions with closing stores, closing schools. Stores, closing schools and restaurants, and stores being open for sale. Those that sold raw milk did really, really well with farmers, consumer relationship where farmers sold the milk directly to consumers that came to their farm or on the farm or at the store. We were able to adapt immediately where the processors could not adapt. And literally for 90 days, they were dumping milk in lagoons and out on the farm because they couldn't receive the milk because they didn't have bottles, they didn't have caps, they didn't have new labels, they didn't have palletizing, they didn't have trucks to deliver to the stores. They were normally delivering to restaurants and schools. So really, really sustainable in terms of stability for a national security. National food security is important here. Being local really matters. And we saw that as a lesson from COVID, that being local and raw really made a big difference. And also there was some benefits to the small processing plants that were able to adapt as well, because they weren't stuck in these big supply chain issues, where if you were smaller and local, you actually thrived, and raw milk was part of that community.
Okay.
Raw milk is really good for soil. You get cows on pasture, you've got a completely different soil vitality going on. That's important for carbon sequestration. These big processing plant or CAFO operations, they don't do this very much. The smaller operations that get cows out on pastures, at least seasonally, do a lot more of this, and that's really important for the environment. And it also changes the food value of what's going on with the food. The omega-3 fatty acids, the CLA values, those things change when cows munch and crunch on grasses. It's interesting that Rodale, who's kind of known as the father of modern organics, said it's not organic to produce milk organically and then to pasteurize it. And I think that's one of the big failings of the organic movement. They pasteurize the hell out of their milk, and it has all the failings of pasteurized milk versus being raw milk, which is alive and literally organic. Organic meaning alive and filled with life. It's not. When you've got a dead product, it's going to die just like the market. Pasteurized fluid organic milk is not doing well in the United States at all. And the farmers are failing because of the cheating that's going on with the consolidation and all that stuff's a different story. But raw milk is really good for the soil and good for the cows in terms of attention to their health and the soil health. Here, going on a little bit more, showing that the data on soil organic matter is really good for the growth of organic matter in the soil. So you can see here growing twice, literally, twice full. Safety. Let's get into the meat and bones here about how you produce raw milk safely and the risks. Two types of raw milk. Standards and practices are critical. Do not think that the grade A standards that your government has for pasteurization have anything to do with raw milk. They don't. On the left-hand side, these are filters from our operation, which we look at, and they're literally look new, except they've got a little water on them, they got a little milk on them, a little cream on them, they're clean. You look at the right-hand side, that's a filter from a neighbor's dairy that's being paid very poorly for their milk. It's all covered in manure. Now, not every dairy is that dirty, I'll give you that. But guess what? Every dairy is combined with other dairies, and therefore it doesn't matter, because whatever any dairy is doing individually won't matter anymore. It's being combined with other dairies on the milk truck to be taken to a common big milk tank at a creamery. And that is really the sad side of the fact that these grade A for pasteurization farmers are paid so poorly, because quality doesn't really matter, because you're going to pasteurize the hell out of it, and that's going to kill it all. And that's literally the visual of the bacterial standards. Raw milk risks. Improperly produced raw milk can harbor pathogens. A pathogen is a bacterial organism which can cause infection, illness, and even death in people. The four pathogens of interest, regulatory interest, regarding raw milk are Salmonella, Campylobacter, Listeria monocytogenes, and E. coli 0157H7. Now, each of these has a critical load level at which they'll make people sick. Salmonella you have to have a load of them, maybe 100 cells. Campylobacter needs even more. Listeria needs many more. E. coli could have as few as 5 or 10 cells to have a load necessary to trigger illness. And the consequences can be very significant. You can get hemolytic uremic syndrome, you can get kidney failure, you get all kinds of shock and even death. So we got to take this very seriously in terms of how we produce raw milk to avoid any kind of consequence of illness with our customers. That's so important. You're driven by family demand. Families are going to rely on you to produce raw milk safely and cleanly. You're not just dumping milk off to a processor and they're going to take care of all the ills and evils because they're going to cook the milk at 170, 180, or 220 degrees and therefore kill everything, including the good stuff that's in there. You don't have that. So raw milk can be risky if you ignore the safety issues of pathogens. You can see some data here. This was done by our friends in British Columbia that were RAWMI trained back in 2020. You'll see that the standards are completely different. The milk that's going to go on to be pasteurized, you can see that samples of 25, 27, even 33% had a pathogen present of one of those four bad bugs. That's really unclean milk. That's pretty dangerous, especially for those that have immune compromise or have a gut problem. And that's a lot of people have that nowadays. They're not like the farmers that can eat anything, including a pinch of dirt and manure, and get away with it. You're talking about people with compromised immune systems that have had chemotherapy, that have had antibiotics, that have all kinds of problems in their gut, celiac disease, Crohn's disease. We've got a real problem with gut in America and in most first world countries. So you would not want this pre-pasteurized milk to go into their gut. You could certainly cause an illness. But if you look down at the bottom here, you look at almost 4,000 samples of milk at our dairy, that's Organic Pastures Dairy Raw Farm back in 2019, 0 pathogens detected. 0, that's 4,252 tests and 0 pathogens. You look at the herd share program in Canada, in British Columbia, almost 700 tests, no pathogens detected. So it's a different product based on different work, different efforts at the udder and everything in the food, in the glass to grass continuum of the food safety chain on the farm. Again, the effect, the RAWMI effect of training people properly is really important. We talked about this already, but these are both grade A. They're both produced under grade A standard, but one's for people and one's for the pasteurizer. So, RAWMI method includes 3 things. You train the farmers, you develop a plan for each individual farmer. You do not have one plan that fits all farms. Every farm has their own risks. You may have 6 feet of snow on the ground and ice cold in the wintertime, where somebody down in Arizona doesn't have that. So every farmer has its own risks, and we have to look at each farmer individually. And then you do rigorous bacterial testing after you produce your milk to see if you check all the boxes and make sure that your milk meets the standard. That's basically what we do. There are 2 PubMed articles out now that show the effect of the Raw Milk Institute training. Here's one of them with PLOS, and I think that this is on the CADA website, the CADA website, showing the PubMed data that's being done. The studies that are done that actually show how these training works really, really effectively. You see outbreaks decreasing while raw milk consumption is increasing. And this data is actually 3 years old already. You see that there's been none in the last 4 years here in California from RAWMI trained farmers. So pretty powerful here to see how raw milk is increasing. Our sales are so much higher now than they've ever been. This was actually data several years ago when our production was much, much lower. So I need to update this slide, but it's pretty impressive to see 0 within the RAWMI trained farmers in California. Okay, risk management. Let's get into this here. Size really doesn't matter. It certainly does matter in terms of the practices you're going to use, but there are practices that apply to small, medium, and large farmers that actually allow for the same kind of outcome of low-risk raw milk. So all sizes of farms need to follow strict sanitary practices to prevent illness, micro dairies as well as large dairies. And on the left-hand side here, we see one of our Ohio-based RAWMI listed farmers. On the right-hand side, that's my son and I. The conditions of raw milk safety are conditions, very important conditions. The more you can get a cow on a clean grass, the more you can get a cow onto a dry environment with wood chips or dried manure or some other kind of a base where their udders are not wet is really important. If you have wet conditions and the cow lays down on that, you're inviting for the cow to have a compromised immune system and also having a violation, an invasion of bad bacteria up into her udder based on the moisture and water. Water carries bacteria. So you don't want to have wet conditions where that cow is laying down in a bunch of slop where you're going to have a violation of the udder by pathogens and bacteria, which causes mastitis and causes all kinds of issues with inflammation inside the udder. So you want more on the left and less on the right. We do know that there's rainstorms and there can be mud. We get that. You have to develop your farm in such a way where the cows lounge around and lay around. It's actually dry and fairly clean to allow that cow to have a fighting chance to stay healthy. So you need a covered area that's dry and clean. There is a continuum from grass to glass that you'll want to look at on your farm. The water, where do you get it from? You don't want to wash anything with water that's unclean. So you want to make sure your water is very good quality. Pasture conditions, wild animals. I know there's a lot of wild animal issues with badgers in England that have tuberculosis. So you have to look at, okay, do the deer commingle with your cows And the deer may have tuberculosis also. Is there brucellosis? Look at wild animals in terms of them being a vector, or even other cows that are along a fence line, they're sharing their pathogens with your cows. So you want to isolate your cows a little bit from the rest of the vectors out there, the other animals that might be carrying some disease that you don't want your cows to get. How do you prepare your udders? Do you clean them well, or you just throw the machine on? You need to go through an entire udder preparation protocol where the udder is thoroughly cleaned, dried, pre-dipped, stripped, machines applied, and then post-dipped. And that's something we have a whole protocol on. You can watch videos and everything at the Raw Milk Institute website. And when you become listed by Raw Milk Institute, we have a video we want you to take of how you prepare your udders to assure that the udders are prepared very, very well. And there's no chance that bacteria, manure, dirt, flies, hair, anything's going to get into the milk tank or into the milk. Remember how clean those filters were? That's because the udder was so clean. Then the animal feed, the animal health. Are you testing your animals to make sure that the somatic cell counts are low? Are you making sure that they're vaccinated properly for tuberculosis, and not tuberculosis, excuse me, brucellosis, bangs, and anything else that's required locally for you? How are you doing your cleaning? Is the water hot? Is your water hot? You have really hot water that's going through and cleaning things? Are you using the right chemicals? How are you cleaning? Do you have biofilms in your milk lines? Temperatures. Is your cold, and is your hot? Super important you chill quickly. All those chilling that you do, remember bacteria counts in raw milk double every 22 minutes at body temperature. So if you want to have a low bacteria count, safe raw milk, you need to chill it very rapidly. So there's different ways to chill raw milk. You can do it through a plate chiller, you can do it in individual half-gallon containers submerged in ice water with ice bath. There's different ways to do it. And then testing. Testing for coliforms, which is kind of an indicator of sanitary conditions. All those things, and then how you bottle your milk, and obviously the training for the farmer. It also includes the training for the consumer, making sure they keep their milk cold. That gives it the longest shelf life possible, unless you intentionally culture the milk, which is different. But this is kind of the continuum of all the high points you're going to look at to make sure that you have good milk management on your farm. And it includes all these elements plus many more for your farm. Herd health. You really want to make sure that you have good body condition in your animals. If your cows are malnourished and skinny, they're going to have a weakened immune system. You do not want to have malnourished cows. You don't want skinny cows. You don't want fat cows. You want well-nourished cows. You want them tested negative for tuberculosis and brucellosis at a minimum, perhaps other things as well, if your environment where you are may need that. Freshening cows are at highest risk for carrying pathogens. Cows that have just given birth to their calf, we have statistically found they're one of the highest risk areas for actually having a pathogen, either E. coli, salmonella, campylobacter, listeria in their udder as an inflammation infection. So fresh cows are one of those things we want to really protect and take care of. And also perhaps don't use that milk for human consumption for a couple of weeks until you've cleaned out that udder and everything looks really good, because that first couple of weeks is a higher risk period of time. Cleanliness. This is Ed Shank's dairy in Pennsylvania. The closer to milking, the more important to clean. Clean, dry udders. I've said it before. I'm going to say it again. Super important to have clean, dry udders. Clean milking equipment. No biofilms. Good maintenance. Making sure your hoses, your claws, your inflations are all well maintained. You don't have any old equipment with cracks. Because you can easily have listeria growing in a crack. We've had issues with raw milk producers with listeria because their milk claws had a liner that had a crack in it, and there was a biofilm behind it, wasn't being cleaned. So really important to have well-maintained equipment. Uncluttered, clean milk bottling area where you can get everything washed in and cleaned down, that's sanitary, no water that's standing, no chickens or birds in the milking areas, and easy access to hand washing facilities for you, the farmer or consumer that's actually visiting you. From start to finish, everything's got to be clean. You've got to have everything scrubbed and clean. You don't want to have biofilms or have flies running around or anything. You want clean, well-kept conditions. And here's a bunch of examples here of the milk buckets and how you filter your milk and how you manage your milk claws and stripping and bottling and all these things. You're doing it with consciousness. You're really doing a good job. You're not doing it sloppy outside with a bunch of dust and rain and everything else. You're actually controlling the conditions so you can actually manage the safety and protect the safety of your raw milk. Biofilms. This is one of my favorite things to talk about because Biofilms are part of nature. A biofilm starts as a couple of cells sitting on the surface of something like a piece of rubber or plastic or stainless steel. And then it becomes a little monolayer. And there's probably some fat and some calcium there. And it kind of snuggles up to each other and becomes a little microcolony. A microcolony protected by fat and calcium and proteins that didn't get washed up. It's a little film. And bacteria are living protected under and inside that film. And if it doesn't get washed off or cleaned off, they continue to survive the cleaning process. And that means it survives and bypasses the hot water, the chlorine, the sanitizers, acid, base, alkalines, whatever it is. They're getting away and they're surviving it. So these are very hardy little protected microcolonies living on a surface inside of your milk tank or in a valve or someplace along your milk line. And something called quorum sensing can occur. Quorum sensing is a newly found scientific phenomenon that occurs when enough bacteria, they get together and they all vote to do things at the cellular level. And they discovered this because of some jellyfish off the coast of Hawaii. The bottom line is the bacteria actually creates their own little force, their own army, and it becomes a mature biofilm, which can do some really ugly things, especially if it's got bad bacteria in it. This is going to add to shortened shelf life, poor flavors. It's going to be an issue with safety. It's going to be an issue with pathogens. You do not want a biofilm. You want raw milk from a healthy cow going down a clean milk line with no extra things in it, like a biofilm. So we want to really make sure that the biofilms are eliminated in a milk production process. That means you clean it and clean it well to make sure that none of the surfaces have a biofilm on it. Super important in terms of disassembling things and crevices and cracks and maintenance. I can't overemphasize this. We've had farmers challenged by this, by not being able to get rid of their biofilms and keep them clean. The cold chain, assuring that when you chill your milk, it rapidly achieves below 38 degrees in less than an hour. I'd like 35 degrees in 2 minutes. That's what we get with a plate chiller. But if you don't have a plate chiller, that's fine. You can simply bottle your milk and put it in an ice bath. And within an hour, it'll be in the 35 to 40 degree temperature range. But this is super important because whatever bacteria counts you do have, which are fine, you're going to have some. That's important to have bacteria in raw milk. That's part of the value of raw milk. You want it to stay low and not grow. Stay low and not grow. If it starts growing, you're going to shorten shelf life and change flavors and all kinds of things start to happen. And if for some weird reason you had a pathogen in that milk, which you shouldn't, but if you did, it would grow as well. So the longer you can keep a raw milk cold, the lower your bacteria counts will be, including pathogenic bacteria if they were present. They shouldn't be present, but if they were, they would be kept low. And remember, it takes a triggering load. It takes a triggering load of pathogens to create illness in a susceptible host, a human consumer. So the lower we can keep our temperatures of milk, the lower risk we're going to have if a pathogen was present. And certainly it's going to extend shelf life if a pathogen is not present. So none of us want a pathogen in our milk, but it can happen. And if it does happen, you want to make sure it doesn't grow. And that's an important factor in milk chilling. Milk testing. Okay, here are the standards we have for Raw Milk Institute and the data we have versus the FDA. You notice on the left-hand side there, we're averaging 1,588 colony farming units, CFUs per milliliter. This is under the standard plate count. In Canada, I think you guys use something else. You use a different system from standard plate count. They use a Bacto scan, I believe it's called. And standard plate counts are about 40% of what a Bacto scan would be in rough numbers. So you'd be running maybe a 3,500 or 4,000 on a Bacto scan, and that's perfectly fine if you're doing everything well. Our standards for raw milk for human consumption are 5,000. So we're able to easily achieve 1/3 of that 5,000 with using these good systems we have. Remember, the pasteurized milk ordinance in California standards for raw milk for pasteurization are 100,000 per milliliter. That's the milk that gets sent off to be pasteurized. So it's really dirty milk. And then the pasteurized milk standards for what the bacteria counts are after pasteurization, you're allowed up to 20,000. You can see the milk we're producing is really, really high quality. And that's something that really appeals to the consumers in terms of what's going on with the milk that they're putting in their bodies. That doesn't mean the milk, that does not mean that the milk is sterile. No, it's actually filled with all kinds of living bioactive elements that are protected with the fact that it's never been cooked, like pasteurization. But it doesn't have the filth in it. It doesn't have this load of bacteria that needs to be killed off by heating in pasteurization. Here are the coliform standards. Now, coliforms are kind of an indicator bacteria that tell us how clean things are. And we're running about 2.5 or 2.2 coliforms per milliliter in our RAWMI listed farmers. The RAWMI standards are 10 coliforms. That's the same as California, Pennsylvania, and most other states. There are some states that are 25 or even 50. In Europe, there are 100. So you can see that coliforms are all over their place in standards, but RAWMI standards are actually on the high end. And there's no reason why it shouldn't be on the high end. And the reason is a cow that's producing perfectly good, clean raw milk literally has less than one coliform coming out of her udder. It's mankind that screws it up by contaminating after it comes out of the udder. So why not have high standards? Because mankind's going to do a better job when they're RAWMI listed and know what they're doing. So the PMO standards are 750 coliforms per milliliter before it gets commingled with other milk and taken to a pasteurizer. And then after pasteurization, it's less than 10, according to the same standard of raw milk for human consumption is the same as pasteurization after pasteurization. So you can see pasteurization is not the end all be all here. It is literally an 18th century solution to an 18th century problem, and we can do a lot better. That's a quote from Dr. Bruce German at IMGC. So pasteurization is a solution to filth is what it is. Pasteurization is a solution to filth. Raw milk for human consumption is clean raw milk. That's all it is. Clean raw milk from a healthy cow. That's it. Nothing more. So you can see the standards really are important. Testing. We do validation testing on our farm, and many of the listed farmers actually have a lab on farm for doing coliform testing and standard plate count testing. And they're able to do that with a Petrifilm, which is actually 3M Petrifilm. You put a milliliter of raw milk on the film, and literally 16 hours later, you count how many colonies of coliforms are on there, and you know you're achieving your standards. And you don't have to do that every day. But you can do it once a week or so. The test only costs you about $1.80 to $2 each. And it gives you data saying you're on track, your practices work. And that's really where you see this decrease in illness and decrease in concern for raw milk is when you start doing your own testing on farm. If you don't do it on farm testing, it costs you a lot of money to send that milk off to be tested someplace else. It has to be kept in continuous cold chain because remember, these are the growing bacteria, not this coliform, not the SCC, the somatic cell counts, which are not growing. You can not refrigerate them and test them a day later. But these are growing bacteria that are needed to be chilled. And so that's why it'd be important to do it on the farm. And we recommend that you test at least monthly, if not more frequently. Most of our raw producers are testing several times a week. And you aim for less than 10 coliforms. And by the way, you really learn a lot when you're testing, because if your coliforms are 25 and you want to be getting 2, you'll know to change your practices or look for something that's wrong and get back to your less than 1 or 2. So testing is kind of an important thing to really have good validation. And I would suggest in Canada, it's very important because the Canadians are always going to have a challenge with you about how safe is your milk and how can you prove it. More about the biofilms being a contaminant, the teats not being cleaned properly, milk not being chilled quickly. All these things contribute to the higher test data. And there's a sample right there of the Petrifilm and the little inexpensive lab. It costs about $500 to do it all together. It allows you to troubleshoot problems quickly. This is a big surprise, and you're getting a very big piece of information early. There is a company called Spectacular Labs, and they're actually from Canada, but they're positioned and located now in Richmond, California. We've been friends with them for about 2 years now. And they are developing, and they have this little cube here. It's FDA and AOSC approved, and they're able to test for pathogenic bacteria in less than 10 hours. That means you take a sample from your cow, you put it in this thing, and 10 hours later, you get data that says there is no E. coli, salmonella, listeria, or campylobacter in your milk. This is a breakthrough. You don't have to send it off for courier at $50 to $60 a sample. You can do it for $10 or $15 a sample on farm immediately. For us, we're going to have one of these labs. We've already had the lab here for testing, and it works great, but it's going to be installed this October. But I would say in Canada, where you're fighting Goliath, and they're saying your milk is unsafe, this could be a blockbuster change in terms of certifying that, in fact, your milk is pathogen-free. More than coliforms, more than standard plate count, pathogen-free. Your Canadian milk boards know nothing about this. It's kind of top secret stuff inside the Raw Milk Institute, but we've been working on this for 2 years now. It's very powerful, very, very powerful. Listing is a mentoring program. You're part of a community of other farmers. You can all work together. That's kind of important. And we collected the data from listed farmers to actually have a database to do research on what's going on with raw milk for human consumption, because we have test data submitted by each farmer that does their testing. Super important. Building a successful raw milk market. I'll just jump into this real quick, and then we'll be open for questions. Selling raw milk versus pasteurized milk. You know, raw milk, you have advertising, building your brand, consumer connection, milk testing, bottling. There's a lot more going on than just selling pasteurized milk. Your farm operation does not stop at the gate. It goes all the way into the belly of your consumers. So a lot more going on here. Consumer connection, super important to have people skills, on-farm sales, consumer questions. You need to have answers for questions that people ask, their concerns. You need to tour them around. You need to build a relationship with your consumers that you have. Super important. They will stand by you till hell freezes over if you're their raw milk producer, because they believe in you, they trust you, they want you, they know you. Super important. So if you're not a person-to-person, people-to-person, get somebody on your team that is, because this is really, really critical. And social platforms really, really drive influencers. In Canada, where you can't really get on the social platforms because you want to keep your milk protected from literally getting beaten up by the regulators or the police, then you're going to have to do this kind of word of mouth. Our producers that are listed in Canada do not have a social presence. They just do everything word of mouth, which is really sad. But we hope to see that change. The work that COT is doing and we're doing, hopefully that will change soon. Building your own brand, super important. This lasts generations, the generations with this trust of your brand, super important. Big value to you, building a brand. Local markets, word of mouth, all this website stuff we're talking about here, and then strive for excellence always. Strive for excellence always. Safety is never achieved. It's something to be worked on all the time, because every day you have an opportunity to screw up. And you need to make sure you're on this every day, twice a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You're never, ever, ever going to take a vacation from safety. Super important to strive for excellence at all times. There's always something to learn. There's always something to teach consumers. There's always something, it's never completed. This is a project. It's a lifelong project that's always strived for all the time. Just to get a reality check, look at these products: meats, vegetables, cantaloupes, poultry, pasteurized dairy, fruits, nuts, shellfish, fish, all these things, raw dairy outside of California, all have had deaths. Inside California, no deaths. So raw milk is not the big, bad, ugly killer. Yes, it can make you sick. Yes, it can kill. But when done well, it's very, very safe. Okay, I'm open for questions and discussion. This was not intended to be a complete safety program. There's a 4.5-hour program available at the Raw Milk Institute website, which will give much more intimate detail of every element I've talked about and go in more depth. It's 4 hours and 15 minutes or so. It's 15 different segments, and it's free to anybody that wants to watch it. And we require all of our Raw Milk Institute listed farmers to do so. And I will say this: the Raw Milk Institute is not the raw milk police. We don't tell you what to do. We just help you to do the best you can do for yourself and for your consumers. We are here to help. We're here to build a community and hopefully tear down some of these walls that have kept farmers to connect to their consumers to build this fantastic life-giving food. So that's basically my presentation for today. And let's start the dialogue.
Okay, thank you, Mark, for that wonderful presentation. So much great information. So I'm going to have Donna, my colleague, start with some of the questions that were sent in advance while I collect the questions in the chat. So if you have one, try to type that up right now, and I will watch for that.
Okay, so just looking at the questions that have been previously sent in, there's this one here says, can you tell us about how you've helped farmers associations and governments who are trying to improve their safety record? What are some common pitfalls that result in you being called in after the fact, and how could they have been avoided?
Give you a great example. In Montana, they changed the laws 2 years ago. A Senate bill that kind of was a let freedom ring kind of a law, where they said you can do whatever you want, we don't care, just do your raw milk and we don't care. Well, within 4 months, they had people getting sick with Campylobacter. And I got myself up there really quickly, and I talked to the state directors, and they said, yeah, we can't do anything. SB 199 doesn't allow us to do anything. It's a freedom law. I went out to the farm that actually had the problem, and there were so many biofilms on the milk bucket. It was like you could take your fingernail and just scrape it across. It was just butterfat was just, they thought, oh, we cleaned it with chlorine. Chlorine doesn't cut butterfat. You need hot soap and water to clean this. You need to be kitchen cleaner better. So I taught her how to clean her milking machines, and we installed an on-farm lab, and 36 hours later, the tests all came back less than 2 coliforms before they were too numerous to be counted. And the shelf life was 3 days and people were getting sick. So that's the way Raw Milk Institute has been able to help in kind of a crisis mode where people are getting sick, but the laws have changed, but the farmers didn't know what they're doing. Now, Raw Milk Institute works with the state of Montana and ARROW, which is their sustainable agricultural group up there. And we've actually established standards and did 2 big training days in Montana, and we haven't had any problems since. So we're very much engaged to help farmers help themselves and become more knowledgeable about what to do.
Awesome. All right, so next
Can I just
question.
interject for 1 second? Mark, could you stop the screen share, please?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Stop. Yeah, thank you. Good. There we go.
There we go. All
Good
right,
advice. Thank you, Kim.
next question here is, what are the essential additional steps that conventional dairy farms in Canada would need to implement if they wanted to convert their farms to providing raw milk?
I think on the farm, it wouldn't be that hard. I think you'd have to have your own lab. I think you need to make darn well sure that the bedding and the situation on the farm, and I've met some dairymen up there and looked at the dairy conditions, and actually they look pretty darn good. I'd be more than happy to produce raw milk in some of these dairies that have good bedding and everything. The maintenance of their equipment, they'd have to do a little bit better job on the maintenance. And they'd have to do a really good job on CIP. Make sure that their cleaning is done properly. Make sure they have adequate hot water. And they're actually doing a really good job of cleaning their milk. I would not stack 4 or 5 milkings on top of each other and then ship that milk off to be processed. What I would do is literally bottle more frequently, or maybe put it in an extra milk tank. So you'd have 1 or 2 batches of milk going into one tank. I would do testing of that milk, and then I would bottle directly there on the farm. I would not put it on a milk truck to send it down to a processor being combined with other people's milk. And that's basically it. That's basically it. We've actually worked with a farmer out in British Columbia that might be doing that soon. But the processors have this funky idea that they're going to take the milk to their processing tank and put it in their bottler. I'd be freaked out to see that happen, because they're commingling that milk on that processing line from other milks that are not doing the same kinds of procedures. So I would never want to commingle raw milk that's intentionally produced for human consumption with raw milk that is intended for pasteurization. Never commingle the two. I think that's the biggest challenge, and would create a little bit of investment, but that's the answer.
Kim, do you want to take a question, or you want me to keep going?
You're on mute.
Thank you. Can we tell the MARC boards about, or sorry, the milk boards about the new pathogen testing equipment, and how much will it cost?
Yes, I would be more than happy. And I think you should say that too. And just say Spectacular Labs is going to have a pathogen detection system on farm available in the next year. It's AOAC and FDA approved. That's going to cause about the same dynamic as a grenade being thrown into a tent, I think.
Is it super expensive, or?
No, it's not. It's not. They're actually saying that the actual lab they're suggesting would literally be given to the farmer for free, because the money is being made on the consumable side of each slide or each of the cartridges put into it. And that'll be about $10 or $15 a piece for those, which is, it's a fraction of what it would cost to go to a lab at $50 plus the courier costs. So I think this is, and to their honor, it's a Canadian company, or Canadian researchers. They're from Ontario that came down here to California and did their development here, but they're Canadians. Their blood is Canadian. So Canada is actually creating a solution to Canada's issue. So if the question is raw milk safe? I think you can check that box and say, yes, it is safe, using representative samples and the food safety systems and the testing technology we have today available on the farm. You could check that box in 1 year. And so that argument kind of goes passe. And I would say, and these people are going to be really threatened by that. I would say, let's be your friends. Let's create a cottage industry that's part of your system. We respect your system. It's probably the best milk system in the world for the processors and the farmers that participate. It sucks. It's horrible for raw milk consumers and raw milk producers. But let's find a bridge and a way inside of their system to work with them, because they're going to beat you up politically. If there's a way to make friends there and bring in technology and bring in knowledge and lessen the threat because you're now an asset, I think that's the way to go myself.
All right, next question here. What steps does RAWMI take to protect the anonymity of Canadian farmers who become involved with RAWMI?
Well, you're free to participate completely with us, but what is the difference is on the website, we just mentioned Canadian producer in Canada or in Ontario or whatever. And we don't actually put any descriptive details, no pictures, no data. You can put the test data if you want, but you don't actually put the brand of and that's because you don't want somebody coming to visit you. So we are completely open to anybody in the world that wants to produce raw milk, whether it's legal or illegal. We don't care about that part. We want it to be safe. Our goal is to be safe. We don't care about the legality. What we want is to be safe. So we work with everybody, anybody, anywhere, any place. But whether they want to be disclosed or not is up to them.
So can you just briefly go over the steps to becoming certified with RAWMI?
Reach out to us, send us an email. We send you an application. You fill out a 197 question, which actually describes your operations and completely how much snowfall, where your water's from, how many cows you're milking. If you've done it before, if you're new, what's your background? Are you a realtor? Are you an ex-Army pilot? Are you ex-paramedic? I mean, who are you? What are you? And interesting to note that most raw milk dairymen are not dairymen. They are people that are sensitive. We've got ex-Army pilots. We've got PhDs that teach biology at universities. We've got veterinarians. We've got realtors. We've got an ex-paramedic, me. We've got all kinds of, yes, a couple of dairymen, but not very many. Then we send you, you send in the application. We have an initial interview with you. We actually have a little Zoom talk and chit chat and talk about your situation. And then we send you what's called a RAMP plan. And it's a template to fill out your own food safety plan on your farm. And we call it mental push-ups. It's basically do an investigation. We will help you look for the nasty stuff you might have on your farm. Let's identify it. Let's put something in place to actually control it using a good management process, a good management protocol, a GMP or an SSOP, a standard operating procedure, or a CCP. Let's control those things and manage those things, be aware of those things, and put them into your plan. And then after that, you do some testing, you send in some videos, we get to know you a little bit more. And the testing would be, okay, here are 3 or 4 tests that show that in fact you're achieving the RAWMI common standards. And then we take your package to the board and we list you and certify you. That's the process. It's farmer driven. You can do it in 2 weeks or 6 months. It's up to you. It's driven completely by the farmer. We don't pursue farmers. We take those that come to us, and that's literally give us the cream of the crop, because those are the ones that really want to do it and are concerned about doing it. If we pursue farmers, we'll get those that are really not interested, and we don't really want that. We want those that are really interested to being the cream of the crop, be examples for others.
Okay. So this next question, I think, comes from one of the farmers. It says, how does the CCP, the critical control point of a 3-cow farm, compare with a 300-cow dairy?
They're the same. We use water as a critical control point. If your water is ever of poor quality, you stop all production and make sure your water is treated to the point where it's good. A normal critical control point would be on a pasteurizer. We do not have a classic critical control point in RAWMI, so we have to use a general one. And these are accepted under HACCP principles, that you can use a general one like water quality. However, with the advent of the Spec Labs testing technology, you can imagine in your mind, you can now have a critical control point in real time before that milk is ever released. You know that there's no pathogens in it because you've tested for it. So I think that we're getting in history here, things are evolving quickly, where we're actually going to have more of a real critical control point than a general one like water quality.
So what is the RAWMI stance on hand milking? So say someone's only got 1 cow. We have not been able to see anybody achieve the standard with milk
hand milking. But I will say about 6 months ago, the first farmer was able to achieve it. And she was an ex-Army medic, believe it or not. She understood her biology very, very well. And she understood the role of the environment and where she had her cows. So air bringing a bunch of dust in and contamination and the cleanliness of her hands and how she actually milked the cow. She was able to easily achieve the goal with hand milking. However, we have seen other people dismally fail it. So it takes a special dedication to be able to do that. She has an on-farm lab to be able to test, to validate, and verify, but she understands the role of the environment. And even humidity had a big influence on how much load of bacteria would enter the top of the milk bucket under certain conditions. So when you have a milk claw that literally isolates the teat from the environment, you don't have those dynamics. So it's much easier to have a bucket milker with a milk claw going on the teats, and it's a whole lot less work too.
Well, now I finally understand what you mean by the milk claw.
Yeah. Hold on a second. Hold on.
I didn't know.
This is a milk claw.
I get that now.
These are the milk liners that go up on the teats. And
Yeah.
it's super important that it's well maintained, and that's where you see the milk when the milk comes out of the cow.
Yeah. Well, I did grow up on a farm, but we hand milked our cows. So
There you go. There you go. By the way, there's nothing wrong with hand milking your cows if your family's going to be the only one consuming it, because you're going to be exposed to a load of bacteria, which is going to be a higher load, and you'll become immune to it. But when you're selling to the public, it's a whole different game. People have heard that raw milk is really good to build the immune system. So what do you get? A bunch of people with depressed immune systems, And so you got to really be game on to make sure you're not going to make somebody sick. And that'll be terrible for you and them and everything. It'd be bad.
Gotcha. All right, I've got two more questions here, and then I'm going to pass it over to Kim for other questions.
Okay.
So again, this one comes from a farmer. If a farm failed the RAWMI application but still continued with production, how would CATA or some other regulatory body deal with these farms? I'm not sure that's a question for Mark, but
Well, the bottom line is Raw Milk Institute is not the raw milk police, and we have absolutely zero enforcement capacity. What we do is we basically delist farmers that are no longer participating, and we put them in the history. They're past producers. We have a few of those that are no longer producing. They sold the dairies, sold the farms, are no longer producing. But we rely on the goodwill of the farmer that they are doing the best ethical and moral production practices for their consumers. And we found it. We have 100% of the people that pursue us have that moral fiber and ethical desire. If we were to pursue those that don't want to pursue us, I think we'd find other characters out there that probably wouldn't do that. But we're not a regulatory organization. We're a helping organization building a community of people who are like-minded that really want to serve humanity with the best ultimate quality of raw milk.
so once they're certified, do they have to recertify in any way?
Every year, we ask everybody to please resubmit your food safety plan with any edits or adjustments that have been made in the last year based on the learning you've made in the last year. And that's the only recertification. You literally every month you submit your bacteria counts, and most people proudly send off their less than one coliforms and go, "Yeah, got it," because that's going to be posted on their website as a bragging point.
Right.
So consumers see more than a white picket fence and nice roses out front. They see the bacteria counts from inside the milk, and that's the transparency that many, not most, but many consumers really want to see in the trust relationship with good farmers.
All right, last question for me. If there was a problem that developed with a RAWMI certified farm, what role would RAWMI have in helping that farm to navigate with dealing through government or medical officials
Great question.
and media as well?
That's happened 3 times in 12 years. And we are the 911 call that they make so they can sleep well at night, to understand what the heck they're doing. I will be the first to say that I've made 2 kids sick in the last 23 years. And as a paramedic, that's the last thing in the world I'd ever want to do. I want to do no harm. I want to do all good. And so from that, Raw Milk Institute was actually founded, and we embraced high standards in learning and technology and all kinds of stuff. So we don't do that anymore. Those kids fully recovered, thank God, no problem at all. But both kids had E. coli. That happened in 2006 and 2010. So, I am a warrior who's been through battle. And so I understand the way you address the public, the way you're sincere and honest and upfront and pursue things with aggressively to fix the problem and how to go fix the problem. And we've helped with media. We understand that if you get shut down, you need to come out and tell people the truth. There's a way to do that in a way that doesn't harm you, but actually is transparent and honest. And you go fix your problem, then you come back with good news that you fixed the problem, you found it, and it's not going to happen again. So you got to be hard-hitting, and you've got to be transparent and ethical and moral, and you've got to be totally connected to your consumers. And we've helped two farmers with their moment of crisis, but nobody was ill in those situations. They were basically maintenance problems on equipment. One had a liner that was cracked and a biofilm behind the liner inside the teat, right here, this shell. The liner was cracked and there was a biofilm behind here and it couldn't be cleaned out. And it was a maintenance issue and they had some listeria and there was a routine test done by the state that found it, and they didn't find it because they weren't doing pathogen testing. And the state said, hey, you got listeria. They said, oh, shut down immediately. They called me immediately. They were so overjoyed with the help we gave them that they actually gave us a big donation in support because they came out of it smelling like a rose and were better for it. And the consumers loved them for their transparency. So we are the 911 call that can help if the farmer wants help.
All right, I'm going to pass it over to you, Kim.
Okay, so first question, what are standards for biosecurity when having consumers coming to the farm?
I wouldn't have them go out and pet the calves. If you're going to do that, make sure they wash their hands. So you're going to look at that in your RAMP plan, your risk analysis management plan. When consumers come to the farm, what are you going to do? I have seen a farm in a state north of us here that's had multiple recalls. They received from RAWMI training, but never became listed and don't do the routine testing, who've had multiple recalls and illnesses with E. coli. But what do they have? They have calves right out front of their store for kids to pet. Calves are a magnet for pathogens. They're horrible in terms of getting kids sick. In fact, you see this in petting zoos at fairs every year where kids go pet the calves and get E. coli. So, kids and E. coli is an antibiotic-resistant bacterial pathogen, and calves shed them like crazy very often. So you kind of isolate the calves from kids, and if you're going to have the kids go to the calves, you watch that really closely and wash their hands really, really well. There's other things you would do too. Making sure that if they do traipse around the farm, that the manure that gets in their feet is washed off, that they wash their hands, that people are aware of the fact that they're from the city and their immune systems are different than on the farm. And so it's a consciousness issue, and it's about washing hands and making sure you're not traipsing a bunch of manure around that they may not or may have the ability to deal with their immune systems. Every farm is different. Every farm is completely different. And so we look at each farm differently. And again, we're not the RAWMI police. We don't go to tell you what to do. We say, this is what we've seen before as a problem. We wouldn't want to do that again. So what do you think about doing this or this and this? And the farmer comes up with their own solution because they don't want to have a problem. We just bring forward the data we have because we've dealt with so many farmers for so many years that we have good solutions and we understand problems.
Okay. If a cow's ribs are evident, does this indicate a skinny cow or does it vary by breed?
Breed does have everything to do with it, absolutely. And also stage of lactation. Are they late in lactation, early in lactation? Are they dry? All those things have to do with everything. So you want to keep your cow well nourished. Remember, raw milk requires energy. If you want to produce raw milk as a nursing mom, you need to eat well and not be dehydrated. So the same thing with a cow. You've got to really eat well, be hydrated properly, not be under stress if you want that cow to produce milk. So, you got to have enough energy. If your pastures don't have enough energy, you're going to have to supplement with some rolled corn or something else to assure that there's adequate energy for the cow. You're not going to see most raw milk dairymen just all pasture grazed at all. The cows get really skinny on that. You need to have more energy than that to produce 4 or 5 gallons of milk a day and make it worth your while.
Okay. So I think we'll make this the last question. What, in your experience, is the pathway to legal raw milk in Canada, or at least in certain provinces?
Keep on keeping on. When you are doing a really good job of producing raw milk and you have a lab on your farm and you have the bacteria counts right there for an inspector to see, and you have a written food safety plan, you are far in excess of any Canadian dairyman that's doing raw milk for human consumption, or raw milk for pasteurization, I should say. So be excellent. Be excellent. So there's never an exception to challenge you to say, you made somebody sick. Don't be the bad news. Be the good news. Number two, build a bridge. Build a bridge. There's a common bridge, and I've said this before, human breast milk is a bridge, because you know what? We're all mammals. And for 10,000 years, mankind has literally cows, goats, sheep, horses, reindeer, camels. We've been drinking that milk forever and ever. It's been a competitive advantage of us to be able to do that, by the way. The scientists say that. So build a bridge. That breast milk is part of that, a common understanding there. The other bridge is, let's be part of you, not against you. It's really important to really beat on the drum of cottage industry law. Understand that the raw milk cannot go to the processor to be bottled unless that processor dedicates a certain part of the plant that's specifically for raw milk. That can be done, but it's a big investment. So I would build bridges, and I would be excellent. Be excellent so that you're not ever having to be a bad news. There's bad news. You want to be excellent, and you want to build bridges of trust and try to get into that cottage niche industry and try to get, I would try to do some backdoor inside the tent work. Find somebody in the milk board with a grandchild or a child that has asthma and get them on raw milk and watch that asthma get better or eczema get better. Say, you know what? That was raw milk that did that. And you know what? You will have their heart down deep in the left ventricle, and they won't be able to get out of it. And that will be really important. I think there needs to be some mom on mom stuff going on here that's behind the scenes.
Okay. Well, Mark, that was such a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure listening to you speak. You've been so generous with your time. Thank you for speaking to the farmers and the consumers. The information that you have presented today will no doubt help both make better decisions in the future. And I think it will also help the members of the Dairy Alliance see a vision forward beyond this. So if you had a question that we weren't able to answer today, we will try to get that information out to you, probably in a newsletter. So if there's no further comments, I think we'll sign off here. So thank you again, Mark. And thank you to everyone who attended today. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, Kim. It's been my great honor. Thank you very much for everybody.